This is the art of selling travel. We're diving in to give you useful and practical tips on how to make more money starting now. We're pulling back the curtains on the best sales strategies to show travel professionals how to close more sales and create raving fans. Helping travel advisors master the art of selling travel. You can't market your way out of a selling problem. This is the art of selling travel. And here to guide you through it all, Glenda Beagle.
Today on the podcast, we are joined by Kate Sullivan of Anthology Travel, and we're talking all things service fees. I absolutely love the perspective that Kate offered to this topic. Everything from working on retainer versus making sure that you have more than one revenue stream in your business. There's so many fabulous nuggets. I can't wait for you to hear the rest of it. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome. So happy to have you, Kate. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. Well, as I mentioned in the intro, we are talking about service fees. And I have to tell you, your Instagram, your stories totally fire me up. I'm like, yes, kid, we see it twice for the people in the back, because it just, so much about service fees. And I get it. There's people out there that are like, nope, this isn't for me. Heck, they've probably already turned this episode off, because this just is not their jam. But for those of you who are hesitant and you're just not quite sure, I ask you, just bear with us. For the rest of you though, if you're already charging service fees, just this is just, I think, going to really lay it in for you to be like, yes, I'm doing it. Yes. And that sort of thing. So we're just going to jump straight in. So you, Kate, actually, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the type of clients that you work with and the type of business that you do operate?
Sure. So I do primarily luxury FIT. And I should probably talk a little bit about my business model and kind of my professional background, because I think those are kind of linked to the service fee issue.
Absolutely.
So my professional background is actually in corporate law. I was a paralegal in the DC office of a big global law firm for a long time, for about 12 years. And at some point I kind of sort of aged out of that, to be honest, because it's like 70, 80-hour weeks. And I got to a point where it wasn't exciting to stay overnight at work anymore. I was kind of casting around for what else I would want to do. And, a friend just challenged me, if I could do anything, what would I do? And I immediately said, well, I'd plan travel for other people, but I don't think that's a job anymore. And he, God bless him, was like, well, why don't you figure that out? Obviously it is still a job, just a really different one than, what I had been envisioning. And so I started to think about what kind of business I wanted to have, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to make that transition immediately, that there was going to be a period of time where I was still going to be at the firm, just based on what I was working on. And so I had about a year where I just kind of workshopped the idea and thought about it, and kind of really thought about what would make sense for me. And the very first thing that came to mind was that a commission-only business did not make sense to me. It seemed vulnerable to outside influences, and I was not predicting a pandemic. That wasn't what I had in mind. I was kind of envisioning like something else happening with technology, specifically with artificial intelligence, that might disrupt the way that travel agents work. And I still think that is probably on the horizon at some point. But, further down the line. But at any rate, that's sort of where I was coming from when I first originated the business. And I also knew that I really wanted to have like very deep relationships with a small group of clients. And so the business model that I came up with was working with clients on an ongoing basis on retainer, which by itself necessitates charging a fee. You can't really have that model just on commission. You can have clients who come back to you repeatedly, but just on commission. But I think there's an element missing in the sense of that being really like a professional relationship in the same way that you have a relationship with like a financial advisor or a personal trainer or someone else who you really let into very intimate parts of your life, who's helping provide a service for you.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what it seemed analogous to me. Was a lot of other kinds of service providers. So it did not make sense to me to have it be just commission. And I've sort of kept that model, but I've loosened it up a little bit. And I do work with clients on just a one-off basis for honeymoons or a la carte trips. Not every client wants to get married on the first date and commit to a year.
Which is good. And that street works in both directions.
Absolutely. Yeah. It gives me the flexibility to, decline to work again with some people who maybe weren't a great fit, or you refer them out to other advisors. So yeah, that works both ways for sure. But that's kind of the genesis of it, and where I started thinking about fees, and where I started kind of pulling my business model together. So right from day one, I've been charging fees, and I've been charging much higher fees than what most people in the industry charge. And we can get into specifics at some point if you want to, because that's the thing that I constantly think about and rethink and question, and I'm kind of always trying to calibrate what feels like the quote unquote right fee to me, because it is situational and it's not a one size fits all thing, for me, much less for the clients or for the trips. So
yeah, absolutely. So how did you kind of come up with your structure of your pricing?
So I worked with a business coach who was not in the industry. She was someone who specialized in working with female entrepreneurs. And so the approach that she took was kind of helping me figure out, how much ideally would I want to be grossing? And I came up with a figure that in retrospect was wildly low. And then how many different clients did I feel like I could handle on an ongoing basis? And then just divided one by the other. And the figure that we came up with was far too high. It was $5,000 for an annual subscription or retainer. And that price point just I floated that for a little bit, and then it just was not, people weren't picking up on it, and it wasn't the right price point. It was a little bit too high. I do think there are clients that could stomach that. I think they're a little bit more in the like ultra high net worth category, or like, sort of verging on that. And that's not the clientele that I've access to. So I've stepped it down, and it's $2,500 for the year.
Okay.
Which basically no one questions. I've had a couple of people tell me that they think it should be higher. But I think if you're in the market for that, you're kind of at the point where you wouldn't really trust someone charging $500 for a full year of travel services, So that's where it is right now. And then for a client who's not on retainer, I right now charge $150 per travel day. And that's the one that I'm kind of always rethinking. Is that too high? Is it too low? For some trips, it feels spot on. And for other trips, I really feel like the client's not getting their value from it because the trip just wasn't complex enough to warrant that kind of fee. So that's the thing I'm still kind of getting better at gauging is, qualifying those clients and figuring out what it is that they're going to want for the trip. And then, maybe scaling the fee back a little bit depending on, how labor intensive it seems like the trip is going to be.
Absolutely. So when you're charging $150 per travel day, approximately, do you have an average? Are you talking like 3-4 nights or like 3-4 days? Are we talking 3-4 weeks, or what are we looking at usually? Usually
10 days to 2 weeks. We're usually looking at complex multi-country FITs, primarily in Europe. If someone is taking like a 3 or 4 day trip, that fee structure doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I probably would bring it down to like, I don't know, $250 or $300 or something for the whole trip. But,
and I think that in itself, there's so much gold in that, because particularly for travel advisors that are first setting out to figure out a fee structure, I get the feeling that so many of them think it has to be a one size fits all, that this is what it is. I now charge X dollars for everything. I charge, this, that, or the other. I think it's really important for us all to be aware that there can definitely be flexibility in that. Now, it depends on where the flexibility is coming from. Is the flexibility coming from clients pressuring you to change? Or is it coming from the fact that, like you just said, it's staying within that personal and professional integrity that you have for your own business? Am I doing enough, or is this complex enough to really and truly warrant that? And so, if it is only 3-4 nights and they're just going to something down the road or whatever, and yes, you might make a couple of reservations or things like that, but how intense is it versus something that is in another country? Something you had said on one of your stories a couple of months back, I think it was, and I think this is where it really factors in, because I know when you said $150 per travel day, there were some people that were like, oh, are you kidding me? But I'm just going to relate.
Some people get really mad about it. Yeah.
Right. And they're travel advisors, because they're like, how dare you? Yeah. Don't you know that we get commission? But in your story, you were talking, and it was very specific about a trip in Italy. I think it was in Florence, where you were talking about this food tour or like a cooking class or something. And that, yes, I can absolutely work with a commissionable supplier, but the experience isn't anywhere near as good as what it would be if I sent you to this one that doesn't pay commission. And that is what $150 per travel day gives you the professional integrity to offer. Because now you're not looking for who you can get through a consolidator, through a wholesaler that becomes this mass market tour. Instead, you're going to connect them with the most amazing hidden gem, hidden nugget that only the real, true insiders know about. And that's what people are paying you for. I think too often we look, as travel advisors, we look at the broad things. How can we get through as many clients as fast as possible, rather than looking at the quality? And in the end, when you take out that mass market factor where you are directly competing with the internet, you're going to have to take on so many more clients and potentially still come up short from those that truly specialize, and they're not using those mass market suppliers, and therefore they're charging their clients, therefore becoming a much more profitable travel business.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a couple of things. I want to be going deep with my client base, not broad. Not everybody is the right client for me. I'm not the right advisor for everyone. I work with a really specific niche market for the most part, just due to my professional and personal backgrounds. I work a lot with management consultants and attorneys. So they're a really specific kind of clientele. And it's a very referral-based business. So I don't want to be, and nothing against Viator or Project Expedition or services like that, because I think you can find some really good stuff there. But I'm generally not going to book through something like that if I can find a really great blogger that runs a tour, or a really small company doing a great, food tours. I think are a really good example of this, because there's so many independent companies doing amazing tours, and a lot of it's just based on who they know. They're usually people from the food industry. Yeah. It's based on who their friends are and who they know, and you get a just much more kind of behind the scenes experience, I think. But yeah, if the tour is $85, even if you are going to pay me commission, what's that, $8.50? And I get not 100% of that because I have to split some of it with my host. I don't care about that. Yeah. That's not enough money for me to substitute that experience.
It's also the difference between going and shopping at a chain store, like one of the big box centers, versus the boutique on Main Street type thing. I come from a small town. So when I think boutiques, they're all sitting on Main Street still. But, or going to the big chain restaurant that has the same menu in every single restaurant all across the country or even the continent, versus that mom and pop, locally owned, where the chef is the one in the kitchen. He's the one that designed the menu. He's the one that picked the staff. And, it's that whole farm to table sort of scenario, that sort of thing. So there's absolutely a market for those mass market. The Viator is a fabulous company in its offerings, but that's not the right offer for everybody. Not everybody wants the mass market tour that you're going to pull up on the bus and this, that, the other. They want to go to that place that you were never going to find otherwise because you had to go down this street, down 3 alleys, cross over, and then you knock on the door 4 times, and then you have to have the secret code type thing. That's where the locals know. That's the place that you become part of the family. That's the place where you get to know things at a whole different level, but you're not going to get commission on because that's not part of their world. They don't even understand that part of the world. And again, on $100, you might make $10 and again, split it with your host and things like that. Is it worth it? Are you legitimately, are you going to tell me that you're going to sit there and do things for your clients and spend hours trying to find the right one for $6.50? And don't forget, the government's going to have their hand out too. So they're going to want a piece of that before you're done. So really and truly, we're talking $1.50 here. And is that what you're going to do? So why not charge your clients a professional fee? Do that work, which by the way, you're going to do it anyways, but do it at a higher caliber, at a higher level, where you're going to find them that more unique experience that they would never be able to find themselves. I love the idea that you use bloggers. That's a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a total sidebar, but I feel like there's so many people in our industry who just have so much hate for influencers and bloggers. And I feel like there's a place for them in the industry. Like, a thing that I'm trying to learn more about is from a just kind of like strategic point of view, how do influencers and bloggers operate? And like, how can I be incorporating a little bit more of that into my marketing and my business? Because there's obviously there's something there. And I think, a great travel advisor is almost a hybrid of the two. Like you have the industry connections, but you also are able to kind of broadcast your point of view. I mean, that's like my clients are hiring me because they trust me. And part of the reason they trust me is that I have a specific point of view and I'm going to curate their experience in a specific way. Yeah. And if they want someone else's point of view, they can go to that person. And I'm super upfront about that. Like I have very specific things that I like, and they're the things that I tend to gravitate towards. And while I certainly do a thorough intake process with my clients and, want to take their likes and dislikes into consideration, like I'm naturally going to be interested in, small, intimate food tours. I'm a very picky eater. So I have like some really specific food preferences. I'm always I'm doing Paris restaurant research right now to see what's open this summer. And I'm, definitely interested in, your typical brasserie and like great French restaurants, but I also want to know where the juice bars are. And like, where can I get like a chia pudding bowl? Because I don't want to eat just heavy French food for 2 weeks, I want to know where the spin studio is. I want to know where like the cool indie shops are. I don't want to just be buying like something I could buy here in New York.
Right.
So, and I think, and that point of view is part of what you're paying for when you're paying $150 a travel day.
Right. And that's just it. You've got clients, maybe they're really into yoga. And for those of us who maybe aren't, we might look at it and be like, well, then do yoga in your room. But what if you could then offer up, hey, by the way, I chose this hotel because just a couple of blocks over, I've heard amazing things about that yoga studio over there, so that you can incorporate some of that in there and make it a part so that they can kind of experience some of their current life, if you will, their everyday, the things that they love. And of course, when you say everyday, we're not talking about taking your work with you and that you've got to put in those 80 hours and, when you're on vacation. But yoga is probably something they enjoy doing to unwind and relax and things like that. So if you can bring that into the vacation, they can actually take a little bit of the vacation home again, because when next time they're doing yoga at home, they're like, oh, remember when we were in Paris, they had the most amazing yoga studio there. And,
exactly.
I don't understand the language. Yeah.
Yeah. The experience becomes like a living souvenir where, like a thing I like to say to clients, especially when people are asking, oh, what should I pack? Like, what's going to be appropriate? It's like, you don't leave yourself at home when you go on vacation. Like, bring your favorite clothes, do the things that you love to do, things that make your life pleasurable in the everyday. Like, do that on vacation as well. Don't, I don't feel the need to sublimate myself solely to feel like I'm getting the most quote unquote authentic experience. I want to have the experience that is like the nexus of who I am and what's the thing that makes this place really special.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
And I think that point of view is part of, what you're paying for, because it's not transactional what I do.
Yeah.
It's very advisory. And a lot of it, I know my clients extremely well. I know they're like a lot of us do, I know their medical issues. I know their likes and dislikes for food. I know what their kids are into. I know, that this one's kids are super into sneakers. So I need to do a deep dive on sneaker stores. And this one's super into like chocolate. So we're going to, do a crawl of different chocolate stores or,
right.
It's very research intensive is the other thing. So I will say most of my clients respond very positively to the fee structure. And particularly when it's explained in the sense of, this is providing me the latitude to choose components for your trip without factory commission in. Like, yes, some of the components are commissionable and I'll be receiving commission for them. The way I always frame it is, let me tell you a little bit about how I work. I work on a fee plus commission basis. The commission is provided by suppliers. You're never going to pay more for a component than you would booking directly. The commission is something that the hotel would otherwise be keeping or paying to a different channel. They're just going to pay it to me instead. It's not something you would get discounted. So the only thing extra that you're ever going to pay is the fee, and the fee is what you pay for my time. Mm-hmm. And most people really respond to that really positively. And I think they like, it's an ethical stance in a way.
Yeah.
I don't want to be influenced in terms of what I'm selecting because it's 12% commission versus 10% commission. Mm-hmm. If it's a huge booking, that's a lot of money. If it's an average size booking, the fee that I'm charging for the time kind of compensates for any loss that might come up there.
Yep.
And I think from a framing standpoint, a boundary standpoint, it really establishes this as a professional relationship. I am a professional providing services. It's an advisory service. It's not a transactional service.
Yep.
And I think it really just sets the stage. And I have a lot of clients who want to really dig into understanding how my business works and how does the industry work. And, they're really interested in that fee and how it operates. So I don't know, they respond to it really positively. But again, I work with a really specific subset of people, consultants and lawyers who themselves charge for their time.
100%. 100%.
To them, time is a commodity and they understand paying for that.
Now, I will say, so a couple of thoughts that popped up in there is that I know we've already had a bunch of people that are like, oh, well, of course, look at her clients. But I'll say I've also worked with lawyers over the years and they're like, well, no, we don't pay. We don't pay for that. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but if anybody's paying,
right.
I'm like, remember when I was in your office and I brought you my contract and all you had to do was read it and advise me and you billed me multiple hours for it? Same thing. But, the thing is though, is that I just upgraded my cell phone recently here, and people are curious about how things work, but I think the problem and I don't want to call it a problem, but the difference is travel advisors, we have multiple conversations going on where we're being very transparent about what we were doing. So when I upgraded my cell phone recently here, I know that there's a fee to have them do it in the store and things like that. And that's fine. I'm okay paying that. But interestingly enough, I had actually over the years, one of my employees at one point used to work for a cell phone store. And so she was telling me all about the bonuses they get from the cell phone companies. If they sell certain phones, they got bonuses. If they got this, they got bonuses. If they did that, they got bonuses. If they could upgrade you to this plan, they got bonuses. Guess what a bonus is? It's a commission, which means I paid them a fee and they got a commission. And you don't have cell phone stores popping up all over for a $40 fee. I assure you, they are not set up in the mall paying that kind of money for a $40 fee. They're picking something up on the back end as well. They're just not being transparent about it, but yet we all go about our day and don't think anything of it. But when we don't charge fees, I think as travel advisors, this is where we slip back into that employee mode rather than that entrepreneurial mode. When we're an employee, we're being paid by those that we work for. And when we don't charge fees, guess what? We're working for suppliers. And that's where checking out, okay, these ones will pay me 10%. These ones will pay me 8%. Oh, I can do a price match so I can get 10% commission and move the file over there. The supplier turns you into their salesperson so that they don't have to have a sales team. That's what they made you. They are employing you essentially because now they not only got you to secure the business, they got you to take it away from somebody else. So you've done all the dirty work for them, and yet you think you're working for your client, but you're not. Because if you're not charging the client, you don't work for them. You only work for those who pay you. And my belief was always I needed to work for my client because I needed the commission to not be a part of it. In the end, if I could price match, if I could do things to get my commission up, that was a bonus. That was never my first intention. But if I could make a bonus out of it, I could make a bonus out of it. But it was always, always, always about getting the best experience for my clients at the best value. And value and price are two very different conversations.
Things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing I think a lot of travel agents, specifically people newly coming into the business, I think there isn't really a great understanding of how the industry is structured and an understanding of the travel advisor's position or travel agent's position within the industry. Like, this is what, a $10 trillion a year industry pre-COVID. You know, as with any complex industry, the portion that you see and understand as a consumer is the tip of the iceberg. Like the vast majority of it is hidden from you. And I think a lot of us just kind of bring that consumer mentality into the job with us. And some people never let that go. And I think it's really important to understand the industry that you're in and how it works. So the concept that I think that you're referring to and that a lot of people don't necessarily think of themselves at is distribution channel. Like Orbitz is a distribution channel. Yep. Sabre is a distribution channel. Marriott.com is a distribution channel. A travel agent is a distribution channel.
Yeah.
Like we're getting one set of commissions, Sabre's getting another set of commissions, Orbitz is getting another set of commissions. If you go direct, the hotels don't pay anybody a commission. They just kind of pay to put that technology together, which is why they incentivize so many people to book direct, right? Yep. Like that's why, you got the points, rates and breakfast and whatever and points, if you go directly through a hotel's website, like, and I think when you look at it that way, it becomes a little more that dynamic of, who am I really working for here? Becomes a little more apparent. Which is not to say that there aren't brands that consider us to be important partners. I think that's absolutely true. But I think at the end of the day, my job is to advocate for my client. It's not to make sales for X, Y, Z brand. Yep. And
it's funny you say that. And this will probably become another episode at a later date about how it all works, because you have your host agencies and they don't talk, they'll say book service fees and this, that, the other, but they never tell you to look for things beyond the commissionable, because the host agencies use you as a distribution channel. So they get their overrides. So that they get their piece of the pie on top of it and things like that. And that's why the marketing that they put out on your behalf is all supplier driven. They're getting paid for that. You are the distribution that gets them paid. And so while we, a lot of travel advisors are like, well, I pay a monthly fee. That's how they get their money. Oh, no. That's the smallest part of the puzzle. Like that is the smallest part of the pie for most host agencies. I myself, I had a whole team of independent contractors at one point. what I brought in from them was so minimal in compared to what I had the opportunity to bring in from suppliers and things like that. And so, yeah, so I think we'll see an episode of that coming up in the future. Really kind of breaking it down.
Visual aids,
right? But
it's complicated. It's really complicated. And I think that like host agency point is really interesting because those preferred partner relationships are really important. And it is symbiotic. Like your client gets a lot of value from it. You as the advisor gets a lot of value from it. The host agency gets a lot of value from it. And the partner is getting the kinds of clients that they want to be getting, that they wouldn't necessarily get directly. So it's good for everybody. I'm not saying that there's like, something negative about that relationship. I just think it's important to understand your role and what other people's incentives are.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and just to know where everybody's reaching out so that way, when your host agency says, oh, no, you got to book with these ones, is that the only way, or is there a bias involved? And things like that. Yeah. Because I think when we can start to remove some of those bias conversations, it also frees travel advisors up to feel more confident in charging a fee, because they're like, no, you know what? You're right. I need to work for my client. And when you can go out and say to a client that's like, why would I pay you? I could book it online, and say, absolutely. I could cut my own hair and dye it too, but it doesn't mean I go out in public after. But the thing is, though, is that you're going to pay me because while I have access to things you could never imagine through my host agency, through my consortia, through my own, agreements and this and that and other such, I'm also going to look beyond that, and I'm going to vet it out, because I have ways of vetting out objectively that you're never going to get. That's why you have a 2-star on TripAdvisor that rates as a 5-star, and a 5-star that gets a 2-star. Heck, that 2-star just simply might be that the booze never stopped flowing, and so everybody had a good time. That's such a subjective world. Travel advisors have a role of being the objective voice in the room, to be able to look at it and compile the data and go through it and say, okay, based on X, Y, and Z, this is what this means. And this is why it's a good choice. Or X, Y, and Z means this. So heck no. And I can't in good conscience do that. If you insist, I'm going to have to, I just want you to be aware of what it is you're doing. They don't get that on the internet, because the internet is 100% subjective for sure.
Yeah, I think you could do a whole episode on what those star ratings mean.
Right.
That to be a 5-star hotel, there's specific technical requirements. You have to be, you have to have 2 sinks in a bathroom. You have to have a valet. People don't really understand, a great 4-star is probably a better experience in a lot of instances. It's just, you have to park your own car.
Yep.
So
that's okay. It's cheaper.
Sidebar. Yeah. Now I totally lost my train of thought.
But you're right. No, the stars make a significant difference. And when you're on the outside looking in, up here in Canada, we get our sun brochures all the time. And you can have the identical resort in every company's brochure, and none of them have the same star rating. Because star ratings in those brochures also come from who paid more to be in the brochure.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they're able to adjust. And what they will say is it's the different room categories. So you can have the identical property and come up as a 4-star, a 4.5, and a 5-star, depending whose brochure it is. And they'll say it's based on the room category that they have of that property. And so how are customers or clients supposed to have a clue? And that's where we come into effect. And we're able to distill that information and really work it out. And then be able to say, and when you figure out whether it's a 4, 4.5, or 5, I can tell you it's not the right property. You can be worried about what the star rating is. I can tell you it's not the right one.
And why?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what the alternative to that would be. And so I think sometimes it's that whole low-hanging fruit. A lot of people get into travel because they were booking it themselves online. So therefore, they surround themselves with people who book online. Here's the deal. People who want to book online usually don't want to work with a supply or with a travel advisor, or at the very least aren't going to give them the respect and value that their knowledge and expertise brings to the table. The ones that want to work with a travel advisor, they sometimes still book online, but it's because they don't know how to work with a travel advisor.
Yeah.
And, there's so much conversation that takes place of it doesn't cost anything more. I work for free, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
When's the last time you hired somebody who works for free without thinking this is totally skeezy? You're totally ripping me off on the back end. I know it because nobody works for free. And so what?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a lot. So I think, sorry, you're going to have to edit all this out.
It's all good.
Or don't. I think what comes up with fees for a lot of people who haven't been charging it is fear. And I totally understand that. If I'm having a consult with someone and I feel like we're not gelling 100% and I get to the part where I talk about how the business is structured and what the fee is, I'm afraid to bring that up too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remind myself, if they're not willing to pay the fee, they're not the right client. And I should just let them go, or I should refer them to someone else who I know is going to charge a lower fee, but still do a great job. Or I should send them to some resources online that are going to help them do it themselves. I've had some honeymoon referrals where it just was not going to work. It didn't make sense budget wise for them to pay my fee on top of whatever they were able to pay. And in those cases, I'm happy to bless and release. But, and I think that concept of fit is a really important thing for a lot of people to think about too. If you have clients that you've been working with for years, and you think if you institute a $250 planning fee for a 2-week FIT trip and they're not going to pay it, do you really want to work with that person? They don't respect you. They do not value you as a professional.
Yeah. And you're saying $250, but I work with travel advisors who are like, oh, they'd never pay $50. I'm like, then honestly, are you actually booking all of their travel, or are you only booking the travel that you get a good deal on? Because,
or are you booking the travel that's too complicated for them to book themselves? And that's where they're coming to you. And if it's too complicated for a consumer to book by themselves, then they should be paying someone to do it.
Exactly. Exactly. And, and that's just it. And absolutely, fear is a big one. It's that fear of, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose so many clients. Good news. If you lose a few because you're charging the other one's fees, probably actually making more money and doing less work.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to y'all are the bosses of your own companies. Mm-hmm. If you want to institute a fee and not charge any existing clients a fee, knock yourselves out. If you want to, send out a newsletter that kind of explains why you've instituted a fee and you get some pushback from people, then who, probably weren't your ride or dies to begin with.
Yeah.
Or if you institute a fee that's X dollars and you want to bring it down to X minus Y for your existing clients, go ahead and do that. Whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think the more we have a significant portion of travel advisors who aren't charging fees, it makes it harder for everyone else who does charge a fee. Yeah. And the more we get fees rolled out across the industry, the easier it is for everyone to charge a fee, because then it just becomes an industry standard.
Yep.
And, people who are going to run and book directly themselves because they don't want to pay a fee are going to do that anyways.
Yep.
So,
well, that's
because they're not valuing expertise. They're not valuing expertise. They're not valuing, the kind of advisory services. They're not interested in that. And that's okay. The internet exists for a reason.
100%. And there's so many that I see so many profiles on Instagram or wherever, and it's it costs the same to book me as it does the internet. Well, here's the deal. When you're attracting cheap clients, it's sort of like Groupon. If you were to put a promotion into Groupon, I don't even know, is Groupon still a thing? But you put it out there and you are going to offer 50% off of hotel nights or whatever the deal is, 50% off a spa treatment, whatever. People are going to buy that. And there's so many business owners that were like, oh my goodness, they love me. Well, they love you right up till they've used that certificate. And then the next one put it on discount. They're loyal to Groupon. They're loyal to the discount. They're loyal to the cheap. I think it was Dan Kennedy. Oh goodness. It's in one of my books. Dan Kennedy, Dan Sullivan, one of the Dans. There is no prize for being the second cheapest.
Oh, that's good.
Because
people who are really discount oriented, and I am very cheap. I love a deal. I love a discount. I'm heading to Paris next month and I'm super excited because it's during the sales. Like there's just a part of me that like loves feeling like I got a good deal.
Yeah.
The way, to frame that for a client in terms of luxury travel, because I do specifically work with luxury, is you're not going to pay a lower rate, but you're going to get more for what you're paying.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get a better room. You're going to get breakfast. You're going to get spas, and you're going to get me advocating on your behalf, selecting the best room for you.
Yeah.
Making all the components of your trip. You're not going to have anything that's generic. Everything's going to be tailored to fit you like a glove.
Right.
That's what you're paying for. And you're not going to get that by booking directly or on Expedia or whatever.
And that's where that price and value become two different conversations. I remember being in one session, I actually want to say it might have been Nolan Burris, where it said, how cheap does a bad vacation have to be to still have been a good deal? So it doesn't, and that's like when you're saying you're not going to get it for any less, but look how much better it's going to be. And so that is so important, because I remember going on like this super cheap vacation. It was like $1,800 and 4 of us went to Cabo for a week. It was like fabulous. It was when one of our airlines was just going, like it was great. The kids were little, but it was the most horrifying vacation of my life. It was nothing but timeshares. It was all like, and if you weren't a timeshare, you couldn't go into so many of the restaurants, so many of this, that, the other. And this was years ago when I first started in my career. And so the kids were really small still and that sort of thing. And I remember crying in my hotel room, telling my husband how sorry I was because I couldn't afford to fly us home because it was that bad. And just like, I was devastated. And so I remember for years after that, people were like, and what about this property? It's a good price. I'm like, oh, no, mama, don't sell that one. Like, that's just not happening. And so then I would tell them a little bit of my story. And it was actually when I came back from that, and in particular, when I opened my own agency, my own brick and mortar, that people, I'm like, no, I don't sell below certain standards. It doesn't mean I don't sell below certain stars. I don't sell below certain standards.
Yeah,
because
a quality
it's
control
experience.
issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that, again, that's what people are paying you for. And I know there's a lot of travel advisors like, well, of course I do that. And I'm like, do you charge a fee? They're like, no, I don't do that, because why would I? And yet that's what charging a fee is going to give you. It's sort of that whole story of the mechanic that can put in a part in your vehicle in 10 minutes and he charges you hundreds of dollars and you're like, what? But it only took you 10 minutes. He's like, great. I'm only paying you for your time. He's like, great. It was 10 minutes to install and 10 years to learn it, to do it in 10 minutes. And that's what people are paying you for. And if COVID taught us absolutely anything, it was that we still need somebody when stuff goes wrong. There was a volcano a handful of years ago out of Iceland. Stuff went wrong. It wasn't the Joe Blow on the street that was figuring it out. It was travel advisors that were figuring it out. And that's what your fee also does for you, because when the chips are down is not the time to then put your hand out. Because I know there's a lot of travel advisors like, I don't charge a service fee, but I charge a cancellation fee. I'm like, wow, that is the fastest way to lose every client. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, they're already having to cancel their trip for whatever reason. Heaven forbid grandma passed away or something. And now you're like, I'm going to extort you to get your money back until you pay me. Like, it doesn't work that way. Collect it on the front.
I don't know how I feel about cancellation fees. Like, I had never charged them. And then during COVID, like everyone else, I sort of rethought my terms and conditions. And that's a whole nother podcast. But, and I added a cancellation clause in, and then I was, kind of discussing it with my attorney, and he was like, I just really don't understand how this works. And I couldn't actually articulate or like justify why there would be a cancellation fee if there's already a service fee that's not refundable. Yeah. And it's sort of like, well, the point of the cancellation fee, I think, is to recoup commission that you're not getting. But then you're back to that notion of, well, you've got 2 revenue streams coming in. Yeah. One of them is from one source, the other's from the other source. If you've already, I don't know how I feel about it. Because I do really sympathize a lot with I have a trip that is a really complex FIT. It took like 5 months to put together.
Yep.
We finally signed on it and deposited right before COVID happened. It's supposed to be last December. Now it's supposed to be this December. It's to India. So it's not going to be this December. Now it's going to be the following December.
Right.
It's a, high 4-figure commission. And, if that cancels, that's a lot of money off my balance sheet. But,
yep.
It's also a trip where, like, in good conscience, I can't really pressure them to go or pressure them to go sooner rather than later, or, it's their decision. So my host agency has a couple of standards that they live by. And one of them is trust but verify.
Oh, I like that.
I really like a lot. And I think that really plays back into what you're saying about, us providing objective opinions on subjective issues.
Yeah.
That we have great relationships with suppliers, but there's nothing like seeing something yourself and having firsthand experience.
Yep.
Or getting, secondhand experience from people that you really trust, who, have laid eyes on something. And I think that's part of what makes this an advisory service too. And I think that's worth charging for.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of there's some things good and bad that I've just not been able to let go from that law firm experience.
Right.
And, and one of the good things I think was, I am incapable of bullshitting a client. Like, if I don't know that something is an absolute fact, I'm not going to tell you. I'll couch it in like my understanding is, or, some other way of kind of fudging it a little bit, but I'm never going to tell you, yes, you can definitely get that upgrade, or yes, we for sure can do this. Or I know that hotel is going to be amazing. You'll love it, unless I know that is a fact.
Yeah.
And I think it's just another, I don't know. This whole thing to me just really comes back to, I hesitate to use the word mindset, but a little bit of a, way of thinking or an approach to what you're doing. Like, are you transactional figure and you're just replacing the internet for someone who's not comfortable using that? Or are you providing extra value beyond that as a trusted figure providing advice? And if so, that's a person you need to pay.
Yeah.
I had, like I mentioned, I'm super cheap and try to DIY everything myself. I would be my worst client. I renovated my condo during COVID and used an interior designer. I was like super upfront with her from the beginning that I'm going to want to be collaborative. I'm going to have opinions. I'm going to want to go back and forth on things. But at the end of the day, I trust you and your expertise and your connections, and I value your network. And it felt like a big jump for me to be like trusting to kind of hand a big project that's very personal over to someone, that I, didn't previously have a relationship with.
Yeah.
But part of me was like, okay, you got to practice what you preach. Like, this is a person with an expertise that you do not possess. Pay her for her knowledge and her time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it obviously turned out amazing. And,
but again, you paid her for that.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
It was a professional service and it all worked out, that sort of thing. But I think just to kind of wrap it up here, when it comes to service fees, the first time you go to implement one, it is scary AF. Like, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. Guess what? On the 100th time you put it out there, it's still scary. It may not be scary AF, but it's scary. And because you've got to, again, we don't like to really talk that mindset thing, but here it is. You have to detach from what the yes or the no means. They are not saying yes or no to you as a human being. They're saying yes or no to your offer. So if you're getting a lot of no's, it's time to take a step back and look at what it is you're offering. Because if what you're offering is, I can get you everything the internet can, that's not a good enough offer. You need to be something that is unique, something that is a value articulating statement that makes sure that people understand how you're different than the internet. Because if they think they're just going to get you to DIY what they could DIY, they don't need that. They need a professional who's going to take care of all the details, who's going to look it all over and make sure that they have somebody who has their back from beginning to end. And I think when you do that, you're going to discover, when you can articulate that, your clients are like, seriously, that's all you're charging? And I think that's actually the really ironic part of it, is the travel advisors that are like, nobody's going to pay me a service fee. Nobody's going to pay me a service fee. So in which case, nobody pays you a service fee, because that's the energy you put out there. But once you start getting people paying service fees, they're like, you really got to up your rates. Like, do you have any idea how cheap you are? And that's when it sets off into this whole other thing. I think my biggest service fee I ever did was like $1,500 or $2,000. And I did that quite a few times. And it was for single trips, like just, I charge, my highest I think was $2,000. It was a trip to Africa, because it was this woman came in, she wanted 30 days, no group tours, and I'll be 100% honest, I didn't think she could afford the trip. So I threw out this astronomical service fee, partly just to make sure that she was legit. Cause I'm like, there is no way I'm pricing out 30 days custom built Africa for one person when they don't have the money. And she's like, oh, is there GST on top of that? In Canada, that's what we call tax. But is there tax on top of that? And I'm like, you know what? Yes, there is. And that's where, and we pulled out a credit card. She paid it then, and she paid for the whole trip. And I was like, huh. So that's how you charge $2,000. Good to know. That's as hard as it was.
Yeah. And that's about where a lot of my fees come out. If somebody's edging up on that $2,500 figure for a single trip, I'll usually kind of bring that up. So I've never gone over that. But I think you raise a really good point. One of my favorite clients ever is someone who, we spent about 6 months planning a really complex 5-week trip throughout Europe. And she was super upfront. She was like, I know how much you charge and I really value your services. I can't afford to pay all of that at once. Can we do half of it now and half of it in 6 months? The trip's in a year. And I was like, yeah, totally. Yep. That's completely fine.
Yeah.
It's going to take us that long to plan it anyways, because it's super complicated. So,
right. Yeah. And that's just it.
And the trip wasn't, the trip was, maybe $15,000. Like, it was a really cheap trip for that length of time.
Yeah.
But the fact that there wasn't a ton of commission, because it was very patchy and kind of hotel here, hotel there.
Yeah.
But the fee more than made up for it. And they're probably some of my favorite people I've ever worked with. Right. Can't wait to work with them again.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the service fees really keep travel advisors from resenting their clients, because otherwise you know how much work you put into it. And because I hear it a lot of times, they're like, oh, if only they knew how hard I had to work on this file and how little I got from it. I'm like, but you're actually the one that's in control of that, right? Yeah. 100%. And then when a cancellation does come or something and it all gets refunded, it's like, but if you charged a fee for your time, just like at the cell phone company, they charge a fee for using their service. The commission they get on the back end is the bonus and the gravy. The $40 on the front at the cell phone company is what they get. Now it is only $40 because they put us through like cattle through the stock racks. Like, we're just moving through.
It's volume. Yeah.
It's volume. It's all volume. But it is what it is. If people want to use their loyalty points, they want to call their Amex, or they want to call Aeroplan here in Canada, or Air Miles, or whatever it is, they're paying fees. So why are we so scared? You don't have to come out of the gate with a great big fee. Just come out of the gate with a fee and get started. And as you get more comfortable with the wording, not with charging, but with the wording, start to increase it too.
Yeah. The more times you say it, the easier it is. Yeah, I just think it's good for everyone. It sets you up as a professional, and it makes you think about your business a little bit differently too.
100%.
You're working for yourself then. You're working for your clients. You're not working for your suppliers.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to leave it with one final thought today, and that is amateurs work for free and professionals charge fees.
Absolutely.
That's where we'll leave that one.
Okay.